if I have to, take a position on, Israel and everything, and of Gaza, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I'm just gonna say this. I found out relatively recently, just by reading about the news that was coming out, that Bibi was allowing money to basically show up and be transferred into Gaza, where it was probably taken by Hamas fighters and everything in order to prop Hamas up, and that he literally went to the Likud party and basically told them that if they don't want a Palestinian state, that they should support Hamas because Hamas wants to drive Israel into the sea, and everything, and it wants to kick the Jews out and everything and drive them out of their land, and it doesn't want to give up one little bit, a tidbit of land for them and everything. But because of that, effectively they are mortal enemies and yet partners on opposing the Palestinian state and everything being, a partition of the country into two different countries and everything with the Palestinian state and everything. And as a consequence of all this, what has transpired is, effectively, because, Hamas has been propped up and strong and everything, and they managed to launch that devastating attack back in October of like I don't remember if it was that number of years. I don't remember, but before this whole bit of conflict broke out and everything. But he was allowing money to flow to Hamas and make them stronger in order to destabilize things and prevent Abbas from being able to form the unity between Gaza and the West Bank. It meant to drive a wedge between them so that they could not ultimately organize in order to push towards a Palestinian state. And so, you have a situation that's enveloped where, essentially where I look at this, I see both sides as pure evil. You know, I really so my the the conflict is just one of being uh, sickened and disgusted by the behavior of, radicals on both ends of it, So, it like so I'll say this, about the whole thing. I am angry, I'm pissed off, and I'm mad, because radicals on both sides of the conflict have, for years destabilized things to the point in which peace has become, a completely untenable situation. Bibi, in his power, has done so much to sabotage the cause of a Palestinian state, and what some of the headlines don't reveal about this or talk about that they really should in the articles that are talking about it is that, the existence of a Palestinian state, or the so-called two-state solution is the solution that, is being embraced by anybody that wants peace in Israel, who wants to see an Israel that, no longer has this conflict and wants a permanent, resolution to the conflict that has been going on now for, 50 plus years at the very least, or 70 really, further back, than that even. And it's just been ongoing for a very long time now and everything. And so if you want, to see peace in Israel between the two factions, the Palestinians and the Jews, then you support it. You want to have a Palestinian state, and embrace the two-state solution and everything. But that solution is now, very untenable on the ground inside the country. In that, there are no Jews that are basically pushing for peace right now. There are no, and Gaza is almost completely militantly against, two states and everything because it's behind Hamas, at least to some extent. There are people in it that are not supportive of them and everything because of the fact that they blame them, for setting them back, in a lot of ways because they don't like the way that Hamas keeps poking the bear because when it does, when it attacks Israel, Israel has a disproportionate response, and so they're wound down and everything, and they don't like the situation that Hamas has put them in and everything. And there are people like that are in the Gazan Strip and everything. But what's going on in with respect to the West Bank is that basically Fatah the Palestinian Authority has been completely undermined and everything, and all this was done. And that's the thing about this. Even back during the peace process, there were radicals that were, around the country that didn't want peace and would commit acts of terrorism to disrupt and set back, the peace process and everything. They were doing everything they possibly could to destabilize it so that people would be upset and mad at each other and be bloodthirsty again against getting back at the enemy and retaliating so that it turned into a desperate spiral of back and forth or bloodshed. And, to me, it's sad whenever anybody on either side of the conflict gets killed and everything. Whenever innocent people on either side end up dead, it's a tragedy. Like it doesn't matter, Jew, Arab, Palestinian. Like none of this matters. If you've lost somebody, of your family that you loved and everything and cared about and everything, it's a fucking tragic thing. This is just objectively a fucking horror story, a terrible thing happening and everything. And so, the state that I'm in, I would condemn Hamas, like for poking the bear, for not supporting, the two-state solution. I would condemn the Likud party for allowing money to flow to them and everything in order to oppose the two-state solution. I would condemn them also for opposing the two-state solution. I condemn Netanyahu as a bloodthirsty war criminal and everything in all of this because of the fact that he, himself has done everything he possibly can in his time in office to sabotage and drive a wedge between the West Bank and Gaza and everything to ensure that there will never be unity between the Palestinians and everything, and there will be discord and division between the remnants of Fatah and the Hamas and everything. And he, because of the United States foreign policy and the way that we often will use proxy wars and engage in things where we set two sides against each other on purpose and or in hide in the shadows for strategic purposes, concealing that it was us that did these things and everything. Our CIA has engaged in this fuckery. It superficially comes across, as a security policy to keep these two united so that they can't gang up on them. But that's not the reality. The reality is a fundamentally political one that has nothing to do with security or violence. The reality is that Benjamin Netanyahu and others want the whole country to themselves. They want to completely drive. They are just like Hamas. They want to drive the Palestinians into the sea, and so they want the bloodshed to continue. Also, from another cynical standpoint and everything, the fact that there is an ongoing war serves to distract from problems that are developed on the home front and everything, and domestic problems that exist within Israel get ignored, for the most part, because of the fact that and Benjamin Netanyahu was never held accountable for them because everybody's so fixated on the war, they ignore the domestic issues that are festering under the surface of all of this. And then on top of all of this, they just want to keep the bloodshed going. And, you've got two camps on both sides, and everybody is hell-bent on killing each other. So basically, fuck all of them. Damn both sides to a fiery, flaming, painful hell, you know, as far as I'm concerned. And so, my position in all of this and the way that I feel about the conflict, and I would vote to this effect and everything, is that I think that the United States should number one, formally end the alliance with Israel. We no longer have any loyalty to you whatsoever. That would be step number one. That's over. Step number two is that we stop all arms shipments to them, and then we call Benjamin Netanyahu up on the phone, and what we do is we tell him, yeah, you're not getting any more arms from us, and plus we're smart here in the United States. We know Israel has enemies outside of Israel, so we know you will need our arms. So the thing about this is that we're not going to give you one fucking bullet or plane or gun or any weapon in any form that can be used to kill people unless you abandon your resistance to the two-state solution and get behind it. We don't give a flaming fuck that you don't want it. Tough shit. You're gonna get it shoved up your ass whether you want it or not. fuck you for opposing it. May you burn in hell. Accept it against your will. Because if you do not, so help us God, we will allow the enemies outside of Israel to attack them while standing down and doing nothing, not a goddamn thing, sending not one weapon whatsoever to them. We are no longer your allies. It's over. If you want if you want the alliance to go on and to be resumed, then you will get behind this two-state solution, like it or not. Bend the knee, you son of a bitch.